This is Velvet Hour, slow bedtime stories to help you drift off and sleep through the night. Tonight's story: Moonbase, Greenhouse Under Earthlight. The door to the greenhouse opens so quietly that the first thing you notice is not the sound, but the air. It reaches you in a slow, mild wave, carrying the green, living scent of tomato vines warmed all day beneath the lamps. The smell is round and familiar, a little sweet, a little earthy, with that clear, leaf-bright note that rises from a stem when it has been touched. You stand for a moment on the threshold and let the moon base fall away behind you with its dry corridors and clean metal stillness, while this sheltered garden breathes toward you from within. Ahead, under a long curved dome, the rows of plants lie in even lines, and beyond them, high in the glass, Earth glows like a pearl lantern hung in black velvet. You take one step in, and the floor changes beneath your feet. The corridor's firm gray plating gives way to narrow panels with a fine, faint texture, meant to catch the beads of moisture that gather here through the long, quiet hours. The air is warmer than the passage outside, though not by much, and the warmth feels held rather than given, as if it has been waiting patiently among the leaves. Somewhere nearby, a trickle of water moves through a pipe and spills into a shallow channel with a regular silver sound. It is a small sound, almost hidden by the green stillness, yet it draws the space together as though each row of leaves has learned to listen to it. The scent of tomato leaf lingers over everything else, and now beneath it comes the darker smell of damp soil and the faint mineral note of wet stone trays. The door eases shut behind you, and the greenhouse becomes its own little weather. Soft, artificial daylight rests along the paths and planting beds, not bright enough to insist upon itself, only enough to give shape to every stem and shelf and coil of hose. The light has a calm steadiness to it, and in that steadiness the moon base seems less like a machine and more like a place someone has cared for over many long evenings. You begin to walk, though slowly, because nothing here asks to be hurried, and because this first arrival feels best when taken one part at a time. To your left, the nearest tomato plants stand on low supports, their vines loosely tied with green cloth strips that have softened with use. As you pass them, one leaf brushes the back of your hand, and the scent rises again at once, vivid and tender, as if the whole row had been waiting to offer you that exact greeting. The path runs between raised beds edged in pale metal, each bed lined with dark growth medium and fitted with tiny tubes that carry water in measured intervals. The tubes release their drops with patient timing, and each drop lands with a sound so light it is closer to a thought than to a tap. Basil grows in one bed, thick and low, and its scent stands close to the air, warm and peppery, but even that cannot quite overtake the green perfume of the tomato leaves. Farther along, there are broad lettuce heads, cool in color and close to the ground, and a row of bean vines winding upward on white lattice frames. The greenhouse is not large by the scale of a world, yet here beneath the dome it feels expansive because every row holds its own small weather and every corner seems to keep a little hush of its own. Above all of it, beyond the curved panes, Earth remains in view, steady and blue-white, as though it too has paused to look in. You do not move to the center at once. Instead, you let the edge of the greenhouse reveal itself little by little, shelf by shelf, tray by tray, as if you were learning the pace of an evening ritual that has no need of speech. Along the wall nearest the entrance stands a narrow table with pruning scissors, a spool of soft tie cloth, a small ceramic cup holding labels, and a folded square of linen gone faintly green at the corners from many washings. Beside the cup sits a shallow dish where someone has laid 3 smooth stones, each one pale and moon-colored, perhaps brought here simply because they pleased the hand. There is a tiny fan above the table turning with such quiet purpose that you notice its movement before you notice its sound. On the shelf below are jars of seed packets clipped shut, and they carry the dry, papery smell of husks and envelopes, a whisper of future gardens held flat between printed labels. Yet even here, where tools and plans gather, the warm scent of tomato leaves floats above them like the greenhouse's own gentle signature. At the far end of the first path, the dome rises a little higher, and a bench has been placed beneath the broadest pane of glass. You see it now only as part of the shape of the room, a low wooden form with a folded blanket at one end. But already it seems to belong to the quiet conclusion of the evening. For now you continue on, taking the next row with the same unhurried attention. Leaves overlap, leaves in subtle shades of green, some matte, some glossy, some furred with soft silver fibers that catch the light. Here and there a flower opens, not in a showy way, simply in the modest confidence of something attending to its own season beneath an artificial sun. You breathe in again, and the tomato scent returns, mingled now with the faint sweetness of composting plant matter from a closed tumbler in the corner, the clean, wet smell of water lines, and a hint of cedar from the slatted supports. As you move deeper into the greenhouse, the moon base outside seems to recede not in distance, but in texture. Its smooth corridors, its sealed doors, its measured lights all belong to another kind of order, and here another order quietly takes over, one made of growth rings, leaf veins, damp cloth, and the soft accumulation of care. The path bends around a circular bed planted with dwarf citrus, and the air changes there, lifting with a small bright note of peel and blossom, though still the warm scent of tomato leaf rests underneath like a low chord beneath a melody. A narrow irrigation rill runs around the base of the bed, and the water in it moves so gently that the surface seems almost still until a lamp reflection drifts and trembles. Tiny clay tags hang from the citrus branches on pale string, and when the fan turns their way, they give off the faint, dry smell of sun-baked earth as though they remember a kiln somewhere far from here. You slow even more, because this is the hour for noticing, and because the greenhouse seems to reward that pace by offering one small detail after another only when you are ready for it. The dome overhead is built of joined panes with slender silver seams, and each seam catches a thin line of light. Between those lines, the black sky lies vast and undisturbed, and in one wide pane, earth holds its place, luminous but not dazzling, a softly marbled globe whose cloud bands look as delicate as milk stirred through blue tea. You glance up and then back down, because tonight the story is not in distance, but in nearness. It is in the scent that rises when your sleeve passes close to a vine. It is in the way moisture gathers on the lip of a tray and forms one clear bead before it lets go. It is in the simple truth that beneath engineered glass and filtered air, leaves still smell like leaves. Soil still smells dark and patient, and warm water still carries that mild metal note from the pipes. You follow the path past the citrus bed and into a longer aisle where the tomato vines climb in paired rows toward overhead wires. Here, the scent grows fuller, and it seems to arrange the whole aisle around itself. The leaves are slightly fuzzy, and their edges make soft shadows against one another, while the stems, pale green and firm, fork and reach with a casual abundance. Clusters of tomatoes hang at different stages, some small and green as marbles, some blushing amber, some deepening toward a red that looks almost brown in this calm daylight. On a lower support shelf sits a broad bowl of terracotta filled with snippets of pruned stem, and from that bowl comes the richest note of all, the vivid smell released when fresh growth has been cut. It is not sharp exactly, but alive in a very particular way, and as you breathe it in, you feel the whole greenhouse gather close, as if all its hours of tending had been distilled into that one bowl. You pause there, not because there is anything to decide, but because pausing is part of the evening's shape. On the shelf beside the bowl rests a pair of gloves with the fingers bent inward from use. There is a watering can too, though it is rarely needed where lines and timers work so faithfully, and its metal surface has a softened sheen from many hands. Someone has wrapped the handle with a strip of blue cloth so that it feels warmer to hold, and the cloth carries the faint, clean smell of soap. Just above the shelf hangs a narrow chalkboard with dates and short notes written in careful strokes, and the chalk dust at its ledge gives off that dry, powdery scent that belongs in classrooms and old cupboards, simple and pale. The chalkboard tells you when seedlings were started, when supports were adjusted, when the nutrient mix was changed by half a measure, though tonight you read none of it for long. What stays with you is the terracotta bowl and the scent lifting from those cuttings, so close to the smell that first met you at the door, only deeper now, with the warmth of the room folded into it. At the end of the aisle, the path widens around a low reservoir basin. The water there lies under a mesh cover and glimmers dully beneath the light, while a circulation pump sends up a quiet, rounded murmur from below. Thin pipes lead away from the basin in several directions, and where they meet the beds, there's a gentle sequence of drips and threaded flows, each line speaking softly in its own timing. The basin itself smells faintly of stone and cool minerals, but the air over it still carries green life from all sides, so that the scents mingle without losing their separate shapes. One nearby bed holds mint, and now and then the moving air lifts a bright coolness from it, but only for a moment before the tomato scent returns, steady as breath. You lean slightly over the mesh and watch the reflection of a lamp bend and straighten with the movement of the water below, and the sound seems to widen the quiet instead of interrupting it. From here, a smaller path leads to the propagation shelves, and you follow it as if stepping into a room within a room. These shelves are stacked in 2 tiers, lined with trays of seedlings that stand in orderly little companies beneath slender light bars. The seedlings are at the tender stage when every stem seems almost translucent and every leaf looks newly unfolded, thin enough to carry light through it. The smell here is different at first, a tender dampness, a young green scent like opened peas and wet paper, and beneath that the warm, peat-like odor of starting mix. Then, from a tray in the middle row, the familiar tomato leaf note rises again, lighter than in the mature aisle, but unmistakable, like the same song hummed by a smaller voice. A notebook lies open on the lower shelf beside the trays, and though you do not touch it, you can smell the paper from where you stand, faintly sweet, as if the fibers have slowly absorbed the greenhouse air over many quiet weeks. The propagation corner keeps its own rhythm. A humidifier breathes out a fine, invisible mist with a soft, regular sigh, and on the clear dome covers of some trays, tiny droplets gather and slide, tracing quick silver paths before joining the moisture at the rim. On the top shelf are cuttings in glass tubes, their stems dipping into water tinted just slightly with nutrient solution, and the tubes make a delicate clinking sound when the fan turns and the rack settles. The clink is so light that it might be mistaken for memory if you heard it from farther away. A folded hand towel sits beside them, striped in cream and faded green, and it smells of clean cotton and a trace of leaf sap, the scent left behind by hands that have moved from plant to plant. You stay there long enough to notice how each tray holds a different shade of green and how the damp heat in this nook rounds every smell into something slower, softer, almost edible. When you leave the seedling shelves, the main aisle feels spacious again. The greenhouse does not ask for grand discoveries. Instead, it offers the comfort of repeated returns. You see the same rows from a slightly new angle, and because of that, they seem newly made. A ladder on small wheels stands parked beside the taller vines, its top rail polished by use, and there is a shallow wicker basket hanging from one rung, still holding 2 clothespins and a pencil. The basket smells faintly of straw and dust, dry against the green air, while the pencil carries a ghost of cedar beneath its sharpened wood. Nearby, a length of twine stretches from hook to hook, and someone has clipped to it a few paper packets opened flat to dry after seed collection. Their printed surfaces are creased and softened at the corners, and they release that gentle, papery smell that seems at once neat and restful to the eye. You let your fingers hover near them, but do not disturb them, for they seem to be keeping company with the air as they are. A shallow shelf under the dome holds the herbs. This part of the greenhouse is lower and closer to the curved glass, so when you stand there, the world outside seems to arch around you like a dark sea held back by clarity and seamwork. There is rosemary here with its resinous breath, thyme with its tiny, dusty stems, and marjoram releasing a sweetness that is almost floral. Yet tonight, each scent arrives only for a little while before folding once more into that generous fragrance of the tomato vines, which has by now become the evening's thread. It catches on your sleeve, lingers at the back of the air, and appears whenever a leaf shifts or a stem warms under the lamp. On the ledge beside the herbs sits a chipped white saucer holding plant clips, and in its center lies a single curled tomato leaflet already beginning to dry. That small leaflet smells stronger than its size should allow, and when you lean near it, the scent is immediate, green and deep and softly bitter, like the very idea of a greenhouse gathered into one narrow shape. You move on past a row of peppers hanging like little lanterns in muted colors, their skins matte under the artificial day. The peppers have their own faint, clean smell, almost watery until cut, and the broad leaves above them carry a dusty warmth from the lamps. A small maintenance hatch is set into the wall behind this row, and from the seam around it comes a whisper of cooler air from the life support channels, but the warmth of the greenhouse closes over it at once. Someone has placed a low stool nearby with a stack of folded mesh bags for harvesting. The stool is made of light wood, smooth and pale, and when you pass it, you catch the scent of wax polish, very mild, blended with old grain and greenhouse moisture. Everything here seems to have spent enough time among the plants to belong to them, even the objects made elsewhere. There is a narrow bridge where the path crosses the main water channel. The bridge is no more than 3 graded steps and a rail, but crossing it changes the sound of the room because the channel beneath carries the fullest flow in the greenhouse. Water travels there from the filtration unit in a glassy ribbon, not loud, only steady, and its movement makes the air seem cooler for the length of the bridge. The rail is wrapped in a coil of dark cord for grip, and the cord smells faintly of hemp when your hand settles on it. At one side of the channel, a clump of watercress leans over the edge, and the leaves are so fresh they seem lit from within, though the light itself remains soft and even. On the other side, tucked just beyond the rail, there is a terracotta pot of basil gone a little wild, and from the warm leaves comes that clove-like sweetness that meets the tomato leaf scent as naturally as one familiar voice meeting another. Beyond the bridge, the greenhouse opens into its widest bay. Here the rows are interrupted by several circular planting tables, each one mounted at a comfortable height and each holding a miniature landscape of edible greens. Frilled lettuces cup inward like folded fabric. Mustard leaves stand with a slightly purple sheen. Pak choi gathers itself into thick stems cool as porcelain. The scents are quieter here, more watery, more about crispness than warmth, and for a few moments, the tomato fragrance fades to the edges. Then you pass a basket of trimmed side shoots waiting to be composted, and the smell rises again, immediate and unmistakable, richer now because the cut stems are still fresh. It feels almost as though the room itself recognizes your return to that scent and settles around it once more. Earth is visible from this central bay in a fuller way. The curve of the dome frames it above the planting tables, and because the lights inside are modest, you can see subtle color in the clouds, not just brightness. The oceans hold a dim, deep blue, and the cloud bands trail over them like wool laid out to air. You think of distance only lightly. It does not press itself upon the evening. Here, what matters is the way a planet can glow through glass while a greenhouse on the moon smells distinctly of tomato vines and damp trays and warm cloth. The contrast is so gentle that it hardly feels like contrast at all. It simply feels like the world and another world meeting quietly over a bed of greens. At the edge of the central bay stands a cabinet of clear-fronted drawers. Inside are packets of labels, coils of spare tubing, a small roll of copper wire, a soft brush for cleaning vents, and a collection of pruners lined in their slots like silver fish resting side by side. The cabinet smells faintly of plastic warmed by lamps, but when you slide one drawer open a finger's width and close it again, another scent comes out with it. A dry herbal trace from envelopes stored long with seeds. On top of the cabinet sits a ceramic jar with a wooden lid, and when the lid has been left slightly off, it gives the air a sweet grain smell. The jar holds tea for whoever tends the greenhouse in the long, quiet hours, and beside it waits a cup with a handle broad enough for a gloved hand. Tonight the cup is empty, but it keeps a faint memory of mint and toasted leaves, mingling with the greenhouse's green perfume in the most ordinary, comforting way. You continue slowly, not in a circuit exactly, but in the kind of wandering path that forms when every small thing is enough to pause for. One table holds only microgreens, dense as a meadow seen from above, and their scent is fresh and slightly peppery. Another holds nasturtium leaves spread like round coins, and from them comes a cool, almost watery note, while a few orange flowers rest among the green like small flames that have agreed to burn gently. Under the tables, neat crates store spare pots and folded capillary mats, and the mats smell faintly of cellulose and rain, even in this sealed place. As you move among them, you hear the slight scratch of your sleeve against your side, the murmur of the pump, the distant breath of fans, and the occasional delicate tick as a drop leaves a nozzle and meets a tray. These sounds are so soft that they do not divide the quiet, they weave it tighter. At one corner of the bay, there is a work sink made of brushed steel, with a ribbed draining board and a hose that hangs in a careful loop. The sink is spotless, but the air around it carries the pleasant smell of water recently run, mixed with the faintly peppery scent of bruised herb stems from somewhere nearby. A bar of gardener's soap rests in a small dish on the sill above, pale green and slightly uneven where it has worn down with use. Its smell is humble and clean, with a trace of rosemary and earth, and beside it a nail brush dries bristle up in the lamplight. There is something deeply peaceful in these practical things being at rest. They suggest work already done and future work unhurried, both held in balance. Even here, where metal and hose and drain should perhaps seem purely useful, the fragrance of tomato leaf reaches in from the neighboring aisle and softens the edges. The farther end of the greenhouse is given over to vining beans and cucumbers, and the air shifts as soon as you enter it. The bean leaves smell almost sunlit, though the light here is engineered and measured. The cucumbers give off a watery greenness, cool and clean. Trellis strings descend from the overhead bars in straight lines, and the plants find them with an easy certainty, coiling or leaning as if the strings had always been waiting there. A harvest crate sits beneath the vines with one cucumber inside, long and ridged, its skin carrying tiny beads of moisture. The crate is lined with a towel, and the towel smells of laundered cotton and the faint sweetness of old wood from the storage shelf it came from. Still, at the edge of this bay, where a row of cherry tomatoes begins again, that central scent returns, and with it comes the sense of continuity that has shaped the whole evening. On a ledge between the cucumbers and the tomatoes rests a radio speaker no bigger than a hand. It is switched off now, but dust has gathered lightly in the mesh, and a small square of tape on the side bears a handwritten date in fading ink. The speaker has almost no smell at all, only the warm, neutral note of old electronics. Yet, because it is here in the greenhouse, it has acquired a trace of the room, a little dampness, a little leaf, a little time. Beside it lies a tiny screwdriver and 2 spare batteries in a shallow tray. Such things would look ordinary anywhere, but under the dome, with earth shining beyond and water moving softly under the paths, even ordinary things seem gentled by the setting. You pass them without touching them and continue toward a row of dwarf figs in square planters, where the air grows faintly sweet with sap and leaf milk. The figs are broad-leaved and patient-looking. Their trunks are still slim, but already the bark has begun to form a soft gray-brown texture that seems older than the rest of the room. A few small fruits rest beneath the leaves, not yet ripe, and the scent around the planters is subtle, more about warm stems and a green milkiness than about sweetness. The planters are topped with pebbles to keep moisture from lifting away too quickly, and the pebbles carry a sun-baked mineral smell whenever the lamps warm them. A folded moisture meter lies on the rim of one pot, and next to it someone has left a length of orange twine coiled like a sleeping line. From where you stand, the tomato row behind you sends a familiar ribbon of fragrance forward, and it mingles with the fig leaves in a way that feels both unlikely and perfectly at ease. The moon base may be far from orchards and summer kitchens, yet some small remembered piece of both seems to have found its way here. The greenhouse keeps offering little signs that this is not a display, but a place lived in day by day. There is a penciled note tucked beneath a clamp, reminding someone to thin the basil in tray 6. There is a mended corner on a shade cloth where careful stitches run in pale thread. There is a tiny chip in the enamel of a mug hanging from a hook, and a soft indentation in the cushion tied to a stool. None of these things asks to be explained. They simply sit within the evening, carrying the quiet evidence of repetition and attention. As you move past them, the scent of tomato leaf slips in and out like a refrain, never gone for long, always waiting at the turn of an aisle or the brush of a sleeve. Another path curves near the outer wall where the dome lowers and the windows begin closer to shoulder height. Here the planting beds are shallower and they hold strawberries. The leaves are neat and serrated, their undersides pale, and a few white flowers still bloom among fruits at different stages of color. The strawberries smell less than you might expect until one is touched, but the bed as a whole carries a mild sugary warmth that seems to drift upward from the mulch. The mulch itself is made of fine coconut fiber and gives off a clean, dry earth scent, unlike soil, but pleasing in much the same way. A tiny porcelain dish sits at one end of the bed with 3 fallen petals in it, as if someone had gathered them absent-mindedly while passing by. When the fan turns this way, the tomato vines from the next aisle lend their fragrance across the gap, and the meeting of the 2 scents is brief and lovely. As you round the curve, you notice the vents set high along the dome's frame. They open by a fraction now and then to keep the air in balance, and when they do, there is the lightest stirring overhead, a movement almost too gentle to hear, It carries warm moisture from one side of the greenhouse to the other. With that movement comes a soft rearranging of scent. Basil nearer for a moment, rosemary next, damp tray, cedar slat, and then always that green warm smell of tomato leaves settling again over the whole room. The scents do not crowd one another. They take turns like quiet voices in a dim room where everyone already belongs. You follow them the way one follows changing patterns of light on a floor with no need to arrive at anything beyond the noticing itself. At last you come back toward the broad pane beneath which the bench waits. It has remained in the edge of your awareness through all your wandering, and now it receives you without urgency, as if it has always known your pace. The bench is made of pale ash wood, its surface smooth and slightly curved from years of sitting. One end holds the folded blanket you saw earlier, thick woven and the color of oatmeal with a narrow green stripe at each edge. The blanket smells faintly of clean wool and cedar from whatever cupboard it last rested in. Yet even as you lift one corner to shake it loose, the scent of tomato leaf moves around it from the vines nearby, gently taking the lead once more. Outside the pane, earth hangs just above the dark line of the horizon, and the whole greenhouse seems to gather itself toward stillness. You sit on the bench at first without unfolding the blanket, simply letting the wood support you while the room settles around your quietness. From here, the greenhouse arranges itself in long, calm perspectives. Aisles drawing away beneath the lamps, trays glinting with thin rims of water, strings descending from the overhead bars, and beyond them, all the pale curve of the dome. The sounds that seemed scattered while you walked now gather into a single, gentle atmosphere. Water moves in its channels and pipes. Fans turn with their steady, hidden breath. Once in a while, a leaf shifts against another leaf, not from any strong motion, only from the passing of balanced air. The scent of tomato vines is warmest here because the nearest row begins just beside the bench, and several stems have leaned close enough that their leaves almost shadow the seat. You unfold the blanket and lay it across your knees, smoothing the woven ridges with one hand. The wool is soft but not slippery, and it keeps the shape of the fold for a moment before relaxing into place. A tiny twist of dried tomato leaf has caught in its fibers, perhaps left there by an earlier evening, and when you brush it free, the familiar fragrance lifts again, concentrated and immediate. It is such a small thing, that curled bit of leaf, hardly more than a scrap, yet it seems to hold the whole greenhouse in miniature. The warmth of the lamps, the dim water sounds, the rows of stems patiently climbing, the lingering care of hands that have tied and pruned and watered. You place the little leaf on the bench beside you rather than dropping it to the floor. There it rests near the fold of the blanket, a modest green-brown thread in the quiet. The pane above the bench is broad enough to show both the greenhouse interior in reflection and the space beyond. If you look at the glass just so, the rows of plants seem to continue into the sky, while earth floats among ghost leaves and pale strings. The effect is gentle rather than strange, because the lights inside are low and the reflection is soft. You watch it for a while without trying to separate inside from outside too clearly. A moon-based greenhouse is exactly this kind of meeting place after all. Root and metal, leaf and seam, warm dampness and silent vacuum. a bowl of cut stems under a lamp while a planet hangs beyond the dome. Yet none of those contrasts disturbs the peace of the room. They have already become a single, ordinary evening, complete in itself. Near the bench stands a narrow side table with a small enamel flask and a cup turned upside down on a saucer. The flask has been left there for whoever sits a while under the window, and though you do not pour from it immediately, a faint fragrance rises from the cup when you lift it, mint tea gone cool, with a hint of lemon peel. The smell joins the greenhouse air so naturally that it seems less like something added than something noticed late. You turn the cup over and set it down, and the saucer makes the slightest ceramic kiss against the tabletop. Beside the saucer lies a folded cloth napkin, and tucked under one corner is a pressed label from a seed packet, its edges softened and its paper carrying the dry, sweet scent of stored envelopes. Everything on the table seems arranged for ease rather than display. It asks for nothing, and because of that, it feels welcoming. From the bench, your attention begins to rest on fewer things. The whole first wandering hour of the evening has gently narrowed to this one corner, this one scent, this one view through the glass. The tomato row nearest you is tied to its support string at intervals with strips of green cloth, and each strip has frayed slightly at the ends, making soft little brushes against the stems. Several leaves hang close enough to show the faint nap on their surface, a softness that catches the light more than it catches the eye. A cluster of nearly ripe fruit hangs just below the bench height, and their skins hold a muted red that seems to keep its warmth even in stillness. When the air shifts, one leaf touches another with a dry, delicate whisper, and immediately that warm green fragrance deepens, as if the plant has opened one more small door into itself. You find that the scent is no longer just part of the room. It is the evening's companion. The lights above have their own slow schedule, and though they do not dim much, they alter by degrees too subtle to call change. The white grows a little creamier. Shadows soften at the edges of the benches and trays. Moisture on the leaves becomes easier to see because it gleams less sharply. In that mellowing light, the greenhouse seems to draw inward, not smaller, only more intimate. Earth remains bright through the pane, but even that brightness feels settled now, less like a distant marvel and more like an old familiar lamp kept in another room. You do not need to think of where you are with any precision. It is enough to be here where warm air carries the smell of tomato vines and clean water, where the bench supports you, where rows of leaves breathe quietly beneath a measured day. You pour a little tea into the cup. The flask releases a puff of warm herb and citrus, and the steam rises in a thread so fine it vanishes at once into the greenhouse air. The tea tastes of mint softened by time, with that pleasant slight bitterness from leaves steeped a little long, and the scent of it lingers close to your hands. For a moment, it seems to stand beside the tomato leaf fragrance rather than beneath it, two distinct green notes sharing the same breath of air. Then the tea settles, and the room's own scent returns to the lead, warm and living and a little sweet. You set the cup down and listen to the water channels. One flow is steady. Another arrives in a measured drip. Somewhere farther off, perhaps near the propagation shelves, a humidifier sighs and pauses, like a small machine dreaming its repetitive dream. Now that you are still, other details come forward in their own time. The blanket on your knees has a few tiny knots in the weave where thicker threads were joined, and touching them is like touching a map of patient making. The bench wood releases a very faint wax and wood scent warmed by the room. A folded cushion at your back carries the clean smell of cotton and a suggestion of sun, though no open weather has touched it here. Across the aisle, the terracotta bowl of pruned stems sits where you left it, and even from this distance its fragrance seems present, deepening the green note in the air. You think of the bowl not as an ending, though it holds what has been cut away, but as another form of gathering. Nothing in the greenhouse feels discarded. Each stem, tag, cloth strip, and seed packet seems simply to have moved to its next quiet place. The water sounds begin to sort themselves into a pattern you did not notice while walking. Closest to the bench is the occasional drop from a feed line into a trough, a soft and complete sound rounded by the water already there. Farther away, the main channel carries its continuous thread, thin but unwavering. Beyond that, from the basin, comes the low, contained murmur of circulation. Together, they make a layered hush that could continue all night without asking to be heard. The scents layer too. Wool and mint near at hand, damp pebbles from the fig planters, the faint pepper of basil from across the bridge, paper and chalk from the workshelf in memory more than in reach, and always, steadying all the rest, the warm green scent of tomato leaf, as faithful as the light itself. Your gaze wanders upward now and then to earth. From this angle it seems less like a globe and more like a softly illuminated presence, a calm roundness behind glass. The continents are dim at this distance, but the clouds show clearly, and they curl over the blue in broad, quiet arcs. You imagine oceans moving under them, forests under the clouds, fields in late dusk, kitchens where herbs dry near windows, gardens where vines climb strings just as these do. The thought is not a tug. It does not pull you elsewhere. Instead, it folds the far world gently into the near one, so that the scent of tomato leaf on the moon becomes one more ordinary part of a universe already full of leaves and water and patient light. The pain holds all of it with equal ease. A little later, though there is no need to measure how much later, the greenhouse seems to grow even more settled. The fan near the entrance turns to a slower cycle. A timer clicks softly somewhere inside a cabinet, and one irrigation line ceases while another begins, as if the plants are taking turns with the water. The shift is so smooth that it feels like breathing rather than mechanism. The row beside the bench receives a fresh sequence of drops, and for a few moments the air near you cools just slightly as moisture meets leaf and tray. That cooling lifts the tomato fragrance in a new way, brighter at first, then deeper as it warms again. You breathe it in and let it become familiar yet again, as it has become familiar many times already tonight, never exactly the same and never far from itself. The little curled leaflet on the bench remains where you placed it. In the softened light, it looks almost like a tiny hand resting on the wood, all its movement folded inward. You pick it up once more, only to feel how thin and papery it has become. Drying has changed the scent but not erased it. The fragrance is still clearly tomato leaf, only gentler now, with a hay-like note beginning at the edges, as if time were turning green into memory without taking away its shape. You set the leaflet into the saucer beside the cup, where it lies like an offering too small to need a reason. Somehow that tiny gesture makes the whole corner feel complete. A bench, a blanket, a cup, a saucer, a curled leaf, earth beyond the pane, and the greenhouse breathing on. If you look down the nearest aisle, the tie cloths on the vines form a subtle rhythm from plant to plant. Each knot is slightly different. Are neat and centered, Some have one long end. Some have faded where the light reaches them most directly. This small variation pleases the eye without asking anything of it. So do the labels tucked into the beds, the repeated curve of support arches, the trays aligned under the lower shelves. Order here is not strict. It is lived in and amended and occasionally mended. You can see where a vine was guided to one side because it wanted the path more than its neighbors did. You can see where a stool left a faint wheel mark in the floor paneling. The greenhouse does not hide its use. Its calm comes partly from use done gently over time. The tea in the cup cools. The blanket grows warmer where it has rested. The room's air holds steady, neither drying nor dampening too far, just enough moisture to soften every surface by suggestion. At some point, a tiny drop forms on the inside of the pane above you and begins to travel downward so slowly it seems almost still. It gathers another drop, then another, making a narrow, clear path through the faint film of condensation. When it reaches the lower seal, it disappears into the channel there with no more sound than a thought. You watch this simple journey with the quiet interest reserved for things that do not need explanation. Nearby, a tomato leaf shifts, and the fragrance answers as if in recognition. There is no moment when the greenhouse falls silent because it was never noisy to begin with. Instead, it seems to become more and more itself. The sounds keep their places. The scents hold their layers. The light remains soft and exact. The plants continue their patient work of being leaves, stems, roots, fruit. Even the objects at rest seem to deepen into stillness. The gloves folded on the shelf, the watering can with its blue-wrapped handle, the pencil in the wicker basket, the chipped saucer, the pale stones near the entrance, the folded towel by the seedlings. You do not need to see them all from here to know they are present. Their presence has become part of the room's peace. So has yours. The bench beneath you has likely held many such evenings. Someone has sat here after trimming vines. Someone has paused here with a cup of tea before checking the basin. Someone has looked up through the dome and then back at the nearest leaves, deciding that the leaves were enough for the night. That sense of repeated quiet settles around you now without making itself into a story about anyone specific. It is simply the atmosphere of a place used kindly. The scent of tomato leaf seems to carry it most clearly. There is something homely in that fragrance, though not in the old earthly sense of kitchens alone. It is homely in the deeper sense of making a place feel inhabited, tended, and returned to. Outside the pane, the darkness of space remains untroubled. No weather passes there, no branches sway, no clouds drift across the glass from the near side. All change is inside the dome, a new drop falling into a trough, a fan adjusting its pace, a leaf releasing scent when the air moves over it. tea cooling in a cup. This inward weather feels especially precious for being so modest. The moon base may hold many rooms of purpose and precision, but the greenhouse gathers those qualities into tenderness. It takes measured water and measured light and turns them into basil, mint, figs, strawberries, bean tendrils, tomato clusters, and a warm green smell that can greet you at the door and stay kindly with you to the end of the evening. You shift only enough to settle more deeply into the bench corner. The blanket slides a little and then grows still. One hand rests near the saucer where the dried leaflet lies. The cup sends up no more steam now, but its cool mint aroma remains faintly around the rim. The tomato vines beside you keep their quiet nearness. If a fruit brushes the support string, the slightest tiny tap sounds and is gone. If the air comes from the herb shelf, it brings rosemary for a breath and marjoram for another, then returns to the steadfast leaf scent that has anchored the whole night. It is a comfort that never becomes insistent. It is content to be there whether or not you attend to it. The greenhouse lights edge a little further toward evening warmth. The ash wood of the bench looks honey-colored now. The metal rims of trays are less bright. Earth beyond the pane grows a touch more luminous by contrast, as if the room is making room for it without dimming itself. This balance, too, feels practiced. Nothing is abrupt. Every change arrives by degrees so small that only stillness can notice them. Perhaps that is why the place invites sitting. Walking was for learning the rooms of scent and sound one small part at a time. Sitting is for letting them gather without effort into a whole. And once they have gathered, there is almost nothing left to do but keep company with them. The water in the main channel continues its narrow passage under the bridge and around the beds. You imagine it returning again and again through the hidden lines, passing roots, carrying warmth, carrying trace minerals, pausing in the basin, moving on. The thought has the same satisfaction as following the seam of a well-made garment or the grain of polished wood. Systems here are not hidden to create mystery. They are quiet so life may rest on them. The same is true of the dome, the lights, the vents, the floor panels, the sensors tucked discreetly under leaves. None demands attention. All allow this one simple scene: a bench beneath a pane, a glowing earth, rows of plants, and the scent of tomato leaves warming in artificial daylight. Somewhere behind you in the propagation corner, a rack gives a tiny settling click. It is answered by nothing because nothing needs answering. The room receives the sound and lets it dissolve into water, murmur, and fan breath. A few moments later, the cucumbers on their trellis release a cool green note into the moving air, and the mint near the sink brightens briefly in response. Then, as before, the tomato vines nearest the bench reclaim the foreground of scent, and with them comes that familiar sense of the evening's thread being gathered gently once more. It is pleasant to notice how the same fragrance can appear in so many forms. Fresh from a brushed leaf, deep from cut stems in the bowl, dry and delicate from the curled leaflet on the saucer, warm and whole from the row beside your shoulder. The pane has begun to hold more of the greenhouse in reflection than before. Earth still shows clearly, but now it shares the glass with mirrored rows of vines and the faint outline of the bench itself. In the reflection, the tomato row seems to rise beyond the dome into the dark, and the support strings look like fine pale rain suspended in air. It is a beautiful illusion, though not one that asks to be admired. It simply exists for whoever sits long enough to see it. You let your eyes rest on that mingling of reflected leaves and distant planet until looking becomes a softer thing than looking, almost a kind of listening done with light. The room continues around you unchanged, carrying wool, mint, water, wood, and green leaf in its even breath. If this evening had started elsewhere, in a corridor or at a console or beneath some other kind of lamp, it has completely become greenhouse time now. The pace here has entered the body without ever being named. It lives in the measured drop of water and the small wait before the next. It lives in the gentle return of scent whenever a leaf is brushed. It lives in the manner by which the room never fully repeats itself and never needs novelty. You sit among these repeated softenings and let them shape the last portion of the night. There is no destination beyond this. The arrival happened at the door. The exploration unfolded aisle by aisle. Now the settling is simply a long, friendly staying. Your thoughts, if they come, move like the condensation drop moved down the pane, slowly joining and simplifying as they go. The greenhouse does not give them much to hold on to except calm particulars. A frayed tie cloth, a saucer with a dried leaflet, the wax scent of the bench, the hidden pump, the pale stones by the entrance, a bowl of cut stems rich with green fragrance, the blue cloth wrapped around the watering can handle, the note in chalk on the shelf, earth bright through the dome. Such details do not lead outward into questions. They rest where they are and let the evening rest with them. You find that enough, more than enough. The blanket has slipped lower, so you draw it up once more and tuck one corner beneath your hand. The wool retains the room's warmth and a whisper of cedar. Beneath that, because the little dried leaflet lay there for a time, there is also the faintest trace of tomato leaf in the weave. It is almost impossible to separate one scent from the other now. Perhaps that is what this place has been doing all evening, teaching every object to keep a little memory of the vines. Cup, cloth, gloves, notebook, towel, bench, even the air at the door. Everything takes on that green, warm note in passing, and because of it, the whole greenhouse feels joined by something more subtle than visible order, joined by fragrance, joined by repetition, joined by care. The nearest cluster of fruit hangs so still that each tomato might have been painted there. Yet you know they are changing even now in ways too quiet to see. Sugars moving, skin deepening, weight increasing by almost nothing. Somewhere lower in the beds, roots taking in water drop by drop. Somewhere overhead, a vent easing a fraction. The greenhouse is full of actions that never need to announce themselves. That may be why it makes such a good place for an evening like this. It allows growth to be the gentlest kind of activity, one that can continue beside silence without disturbing it. The scent of the vines says as much. It is the smell of green things carrying on with their own calm work under patient light. At length, you set the empty cup back onto its saucer and leave it there. The tiny, dried leaflet beside it has become part of the arrangement now, as though it had always been meant to rest near the cup's rim. The bench, the table, the blanket, the row of vines, the broad pane, and the glowing earth outside all seem to have found their final positions for the night. Nothing calls for one more tour of the aisles. Nothing asks to be checked or adjusted. The trays and shelves and channels are already in their rhythms. The tools on the work table are already put away. The seedlings are already under their bars of light. The greenhouse has moved from welcome to companionship to this last quiet stage of simply being together. So you remain where you are and let the room keep you company. The water continues in its unobtrusive paths. The fans turn their mild circles. The artificial daylight holds its soft warmth. The scents layer and thin and return with tomato leaf always nearest, always recognizable, always somehow new. Earth hangs beyond the dome, luminous and calm, while inside the rows of slow green plants rest in ordered abundance. The small curled leaflet lies on the saucer, the terracotta bowl of cut stems waits across the aisle, and the whole greenhouse breathes in long, invisible measures around the bench. Here, in this warm garden on the quiet moon, the evening becomes very simple at last, and then simpler still.